Good evening, everyone. Susan Reaver here at theorganictarian.com and ahealthfullifestyle.com. So, I would like to actually share with you my story and how I actually was able to reverse autoimmune disease and share with you sort of how I was able to do that. So, life always gives you, or sometimes throws you, right, curveballs, things that you never expected. And, you know, life can take you sometimes all of a sudden in a completely different direction. And I found myself sort of this happening in 2010, where my life kind of took a 180-degree turn. The first symptoms of one of my autoimmune diseases, which is hyperthyroidism, sort of reared its ugly head during the winter of 2010. And I basically woke up in the middle of the night in a complete panic. My heart was beating so fast, it literally felt like it was going to explode. It felt like I had just run a marathon. Literally, I thought I was having a heart attack. Luckily, I actually just had a physical the week before, so when I was rushed into the emergency room, my blood tests were already back, and of course, it confirmed that my thyroid gland was overactive. Sort of making excessive amounts of course, the thyroid hormone. And remember that your thyroid gland, a lot of people don't really realize, which is part of your endocrine system, but it actually regulates pretty big kind of body functions, right? Like breathing, heart rate, body weight, body temperature, cholesterol levels, even your menstrual cycles, and of course your central and peripheral nervous system. So actually it does it a lot. And of course showed that both my T4 and my T3 levels were higher than normal. And normally if you're hyperthyroid, you're put on what's called tapazole. And also I was also put on beta blockers just because, again, my heart was beating so fast, and of course just sent home. A few days later, I did go see my endocrinologist and, of course, confirmed it was hyperthyroidism, which was caused by another autoimmune disorder, Graves' disease. Now, Graves, what happens is the body makes an antibody, which is a protein produced by the body to protect against a virus or bacteria. And this is called the thyroid stimulating immunoglobulin, or the TSI, and this causes the thyroid gland to make too much thyroid hormone. Autoimmune conditions, I guess, run in my family, specifically type 1 diabetes and thyroid, but most people in my family are hypothyroid, not hyperthyroid like myself. My mom is also celiac, and of course she suffers from hypothyroidism. One of my aunts actually had Hashimoto's disease, which is a type of hypothyroidism. That's where you tend to get the goiter. You know, your thyroid gland produces too much, the thyroid hormone. And of course, several of our family members are type 1 diabetes, and of course, also hypothyroidism. So I spent the next several months, of course, just living with my disorders, and I figured that, you know, that year couldn't get any worse. I figured, you know, my age, I had hormonal issues all the way through my 30s, so, you know, this was just, you know, something that, you know, wasn't overly shocking, considering a lot of my female family members, of course, have thyroid issues. But, you know, it's not fun, especially when you're hyperthyroid. I mean, some of the symptoms, you know, I developed insomnia. Of course, I had hair loss, fatigue, irritability, increased sweating. It felt like someone had turned on the internal oven. So a lot of heat intolerance and dizziness. But it turns out that months into my ordeal, so now we're getting to more of the summer of 2010, I started actually experiencing sharp ongoing pains in my pelvis and my lower back. The pains sometimes were so severe that I could not move or walk. During my many trips to the emergency room, which were not fun at all, I was told by several doctors that I most likely had a bladder infection or appendicitis. You gotta love that, where doctors are just basically making stuff up, or, you know, I knew that that's not what it was, and it took me several times to go to the emergency room to finally, you know, I said to my doctor, you know, I need to have a pelvic ultrasound. I know that's something else. And of course, wouldn't you know it, 2 large masses on both of my ovaries. So then you're sitting there going, well, do I have cancer? Of course, ultrasounds cannot give you a definitive answer of whether it's cancer or not. So they scheduled me for an MRI, and again, showing the 2 large masses, but again, could not sort of give me a definitive answer. Yes, you have cancer. No, you don't have cancer. So I was scheduled for an emergency laparoscopic surgery in January of 2011. So during the month that followed, not only are you stressed because you're thinking you might have cancer, but I was also exhausted all the time because I also was having hyperthyroidism and Graves' disease. So it wasn't a very fun thing to live through, and certainly wasn't a very fun Christmas. And I remember waking up in the emergency room after my laparoscopic surgery. My doctor actually walked over, and even though I was kind of groggy, because you're still kind of not really out of the anesthetic, he just basically said, you do not have cancer. So I was relieved. And the next morning when I, sort of had woken up, he told me that, of course, what I had was stage 4 endometriosis. Luckily, the doctor, who was of course a very talented surgeon, I did not have to have a complete hysterectomy, so I was able to keep one of my ovaries and fallopian tubes. But I thought, so here in 1 year, I developed 3 disorders, all related to hormones and your endocrine system. Now, my body's trying to tell me something. Either I can listen to what it's trying to tell me and try to fix it, or I can basically live with my diseases and possibly it could come back, right? A lot of people with endometriosis have tendency to have more than one surgeries because it tends to come back. There are no known cures, or they don't really know what causes it. And so they basically the only solutions most doctors will give you are they can put you on the pill, or they can give you like a hormone shot, which basically are fake hormones. And that wasn't going to sit well for me, because when I had been on the pill before when I was younger, I developed all the side effects. So I thought that's not happening. And it's funny because the study has shown that women should avoid exposure to estrogen-like compounds in the environment because high levels of the female hormone in the uterus are associated with endometriosis. So I'm a researcher, I'm a biologist by trade. I've been teaching academia for the last 15 years. And so I started doing research because I figured there's got to be a better way to solve my issues than what my doctors were telling me. Either just live with my medication that my endocrinologist put me on and, go on birth control pill for my endometriosis. And so that's basically what I did. I sat in front of the computer and really had no idea what I was looking for, but I just started typing in, like most people do, alternatives for endometriosis, sort of natural, remedies, that kind of thing. And I started to see patterns. And really up until 2011, I didn't know anything about environmental triggers, environmental toxins, or xenoestrogens that actually can influence autoimmune disease and or hormonal imbalances. I thought that all personal care products were rigorously tested for safety, and I did not realize that some of the foods I was also eating were also triggers. So I figured if I could actually identify these triggers, that maybe I could reverse my conditions. So I realized that the majority of these triggers were sitting in my bathroom upstairs. It turned out that all of my personal care products that I was using at the time, and I was not using, I was kind of using a mixture of oil of Olay, Neutrogena, which I really liked, the drugstore kind of brands, but I also was using some more expensive ones like Clinique and Lancome. But all of them, and even my salon shampoos, etc., contained either one or more of these xenoestrogens and or environmental triggers or toxins. And I was so mad and horrified because I wondered why the ingredients were being allowed by the FDA and Health Canada. Now, shockingly, approximately 120 chemicals in personal care products are used every day by women, and roughly 80 chemicals are used every day by men. The majority of these chemicals are untested for safety because the government does not have the authority to do anything. And several of them are endocrine disruptors and or hormone mimickers. So there are 5 ingredients that you should avoid at all costs if you have thyroid disease or autoimmune disorders, parabens, fragrance, oxybenzone, triclosan, and heavy metals. Scientists actually working at the MRC National Institute for Medical Research have shown that environmental factors can influence the development of autoimmune diseases like MS and others. So I basically threw out all my personal care products, hundreds of them, and replaced them with toxin-free alternatives. What are you going to do when you're developing 3 disorders in a year? You got to take sort of drastic measures. At least that's what I thought. Now, looking at food and dietary components, now environmental estrogens can also be found in a variety of foods. So phyto, which refers to plants, right? Phytoestrogens occur in plants such as clover and soy. I had no idea soy was very high in estrogen. Mycoestrogens are food contaminants produced by, of course, funguses. And then, of course, if you don't eat organic, right, and you're just buying meat, dairy products, and eggs just from your store, remember that most of these animals are actually fed these xenogen hormones, right? So they're injected with these hormones and steroids, and they do relatively high concentrations of estrogen. So here my body was getting estrogen from a whole bunch of different, areas, because remember, you are what you absorb, either through your skin, if you inhale it, or you ingest it. So I stopped eating soy. I started consuming dairy alternatives such as almond milk and yogurt. I stopped purchasing my meat from local farmers, and started buying locally so I could ask the farmer questions about if he was giving his livestock these hormones, right? They were being treated with these exogenous hormones. And then, of course, I started to eat whole foods and limited my intake of processed foods. Now, believe it or not, estrogens can also be found, what's referred to as industrial estrogens. And these are in synthetic chemicals produced for specific purposes, whether they're found in plastics or detergents or surfactants or even in pesticides. Metalloestrogens are found in heavy metals, and estrogens can also be administered through medications such as oral contraceptives. Yes, even my birth control, right? Again, that fake hormone, and of course, hormone replacement therapy. So I started using non-toxic home cleaning products. I made sure I was filtering my water to take out as much stuff as possible. And you can find filters anywhere, and you can make sure you're getting ones that, of course, are filtering out some of these those heavy metals and contaminants that, of course, link to hormones. I switched my plastic containers over to glass or steel, and I started to exercise again. So, a lot of information, and also with autoimmune, remember, it's also associated with leaky gut. So in order to help heal your lining of your GI tract, you have to stop eating inflammatory foods, and those are things like gluten and dairy. Okay, so I, again, started eating gluten-free. You can use what's called the 4-hour approach to help heal your body, and that's, again, what I did. You need to remove those triggers and the toxins, right? And those are found in your food and environmental factors. You have to replace with healing foods and toxin-free alternatives like certified organic personal care products, organic dairy, local meat, or you can ask the farmer, if he's giving his livestock these hormones, switching over to glass, removing all the plastics from your household, those kinds of things. Of course, you need to repair your gut and tissues with specific sort of supplements such as L-glutamine, and you have to rebalance the gut with probiotics. So my recovery wasn't overnight. Obviously, it took a long time because my guess is it took years for the buildup of all 3 of these diseases to happen, in 1 year. So obviously, they weren't gonna be reversed overnight. But 2.5 years later, I did reverse them. And it's now been over 3 years since I have gone off my thyroid medication. I no longer have Graves' disease, and I've never had my endometriosis come back. So pretty proud to say that. So if you'd like for more information, I wrote a blog about this on my website, theorganictarian.com. So I'll put a link below where you can actually read sort of the blog in full detail. And you can also sign up for my newsletter, and would love it also if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. That would really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening, and love sharing my story. Hopefully it helps some of you. So good night.